Welcome, special tribute episode, just a weekend episode. I have wanted to do a tribute to Bert Sugar for a long time, and I think I'm just going to pop it in here and give you listeners a chance to have some additional understanding about a guy that is an unsung hero in our industry. Thanks to sponsors, Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication, ComC.com, Heritage Auctions, Huggins & Scott Auctions, Burbank Sports Cards, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Panini, Topps, and Upper Deck. Bert Randolph Sugar, passed away about 8 years ago, as is mostly the case on these. I did have interactions with Bert, quite a character, and really a character. But you know, what they said about him was true. He was a great storyteller, very, very witty, was totally into boxing. So he wasn't as much into sports cards other than boxing. And even that, I don't think he was a big card guy. He was more of publications. He'd been the editor of he'd actually, I think, purchased The Ring. So again, I wouldn't be doing a tribute to him if the only thing that was involved was boxing, even though boxing is a sport and it's worthy. Again, he doesn't fit, because of that. He was, again, he always had a cigar, and, you know, he died of lung cancer, and he was 75 years old. So he was not old enough to be my dad, but old enough to be an older brother, and was I always had very positive, interactions with him. What I want to bring out is that in the obits and in his Wikipedia page, there is no mention of a couple of things that were, very noteworthy in our industry, and I think noteworthy about the man himself. Back, can't remember this, the 70s or the 80s, but he wound up doing some kind of reproduction books. He did take some classic baseball cards and reprinted them on cardstock, and they were perfed in a book. And you still see them occasionally. They're difficult to perf out and keep in nice shape, but they're a card of a card. They're a picture of a picture. So it's hard to confuse them for the real thing, but on the other hand, it gives people a chance to see what the old cards were like. And back in that day, that was interesting. He did, the other thing that again ties into what I was doing is that in 1975, he came out with a sports collector's Bible. Now I wouldn't call him the author of it. I'd call him the editor. He was compiling, from some experts around the country. And, I got a copy of that first, edition, read it cover to cover. He did another edition in 77, but, and it was fabulous. It was not, fully accurate. He had some difficulty, because he had many different contributors, many of whom I also know, but there was conflicting information, and he had some duplications and things like that. But again, I don't want to throw stones at something. There was nothing out there like this. And when he put out the Sports Collector's Bible, which is kind of a daunting title, when people accused me back in the day of, that the Beckett Monthly was the Bible of the industry. It seems a little sacrilegious, but nevertheless, I'm not the one saying it. But he was the one saying that this is the sports collector's Bible, and it was the only thing out there in 75. And I did my first survey in 76, kind of published it in 77. So I was following in his footsteps to some degree, in the sense that he showed me what was possible if you tap into some of the expertise around the country. Again, many of those gentlemen I knew as well. And he was, it kind of put the hobby on the map. It got things going. His managing editor was Keith Olbermann, who has gone on to great fame, and again, a very sharp guy in his own right. But Bert was what did they say? They say he's like a raconteur. He was a recounter of stories, and just he could hold a group, in the palm of his hand of telling these stories. So he came to some of the early shows. I remember seeing him in the 70s and the 80s and interacting with him, and he was very interested in what I was doing. And I was always complimentary of what he had done. But by that time that I got in the game, I think he had kind of moved on to boxing, which clearly was his first love and a deep love. So again, the hobby needs to acknowledge the pioneers. Now I'm looking like I'm a pioneer, but I want to bring to you some of the people that went before me. That here's a guy that stepped up and did a paperback edition, but it was 557 pages, compiling a bunch of checklists, a little bit of pricing guidance, but mainly checklists for all kinds of sets. And again, when it was the only thing in town, it was still helpful, but it showed me what was possible. So thanks, Bert. Thanks for your contributions. You are not forgotten by me, and I hope not by our listeners. You can look up, he's got a Wikipedia entry. He's in the International Boxing Hall of Fame. Was a guy that was kind of an unforgettable character. So Bert, don't forget you. I don't forget you, and I hope the listeners don't either. So again, thanks, listeners. Be back again tomorrow with another episode.